All right, so for homework, you guys watched the participle video and did those exercises. Remind me, Candy, what's a participle?
A participle is like a verb with the ing or the ed ending.
Good, good. And what do participles do in our writing? What did you take from the video about how they enhance or support our writing?
They act like adjectives, right?
Okay, they act like adjectives.
Yeah.
Good. So they give information like adjectives would give. What else, Liza?
They just like give detail, and generally it describes either the whole sentence or like the noun.
Okay.
Sentence.
Okay. I think another point to make is that participles allow us to be a little more concise sometimes, right? We give more information, but in a really economical kind of way. All right. I have some other examples of participles here that I've pulled from different kinds of writing than what you saw on the video. Will you make sure one gets over to Shaylee there? So I want you to take a few minutes and I want you to look at these. I just, for the sake of time, I bolded the participles. But I want you to spend just a couple of minutes looking at these examples. And then I want you to tell me what you notice about them, what these participles are doing in the sentences. Okay, what are some things that you notice, Carly?
After the participle, or like what comes after the actual like ing word, is like the big reveal. It's like the punchline of the joke. Or
So a big reveal. A reveal of what, would you say?
Of the whole point they're trying to get to in the sentence.
Okay.
That's really weird what you're saying. But
Okay. But the participle reveals something that's sort of set up previously?
yeah.
Okay.
So you're waiting to get there.
Thank you. What would you say, Rach?
It kind of presents an argument or stance, and like it's
Okay.
obviously very deliberate in these because the participle is always arguing or suggesting.
Yeah.
But it just kind of highlights in a clear, concise way exactly what they were doing indicates.
Okay. Thank you. Good. What else, Dallin?
It kind of modifies something that was like, so there's a clause, and then you have your participle phrase, and the participle phrase modifies something that's like not at the end. Like for instance,
Yeah.
courts have upheld such workplace discrimination, arguing that companies, and so arguing companies modifies the like why did they upheld something or for what or what is going on.
Okay, so it gives an explanation or a reason, perhaps. Okay, good, good. What else do you notice, Liza?
I also noticed like it doesn't have to begin like when you add on participle, it doesn't have to restate the subject.
Okay.
So you don't have to begin a whole new sentence and say this is why. It just says suggesting blah blah blah.
Okay, so and this goes back to what you saw in the video about how participles help us be more concise, right? We could, for instance, like look at that sentence about Oregon, the third sentence. However, most states resemble Oregon in terms of having wide variation in religious climate, period. We could say this similarity suggests that blah 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 or something, right? But we don't. We can cut out some of those words and tack it on there and still get that same meaning in fewer words. Great observation.
I like too that it gives you sentence variety. Like all the
Good.
sentences don't start with the same thing and aren't the same length. Like it lengthens some and it can contract some.
Good. Okay. Great. I want us to look. You've got today with you, right, drafts of your op-ed piece, and I want us to talk about how participles can help us be more economical in our drafting and including multiple ideas in these sentences. So that's why I gave you these. These all come from either research studies or sort of editorial opinion kinds of pieces, informative pieces, where part of the goal of the participle is to do one of two things, either to substantiate something that's been stated already in the main idea, the main clause, So, you know, that workplace discrimination one, let me show you why they've upheld that, right? So I'm going to substantiate that. Or in the Oregon one, there's a sort of inference that comes about what came earlier in the sentence. Because Oregon is typical to a lot of the US, we can infer something, right?
Correlation.
Yeah, a correlation or something. And I'm glad, I think, Rachel, you picked up on this idea that this is implied by the choice of participle. If we use the participle arguing, we're kind of implying a certain relationship between the participle and the rest of the main clause. Or if we say suggesting, that suggests an inference or something like that. So, just on, you know what, on the back of this, let's play around with a couple of sentences here. Here's a, like let's take that Oregon one. And this is an example of how the participle can suggest something or infer something based on what comes in our main clause, right? So if we have this sentence with this structure, I want us to take a stab at imitating this structure ourselves. So for instance, here's one of my efforts. However, most states are like Utah in that they have recently increased clean air requirements, suggesting that air quality is a problem that many areas are addressing. Okay, or here's another one. This one might be more relevant to some of your op-eds. However, most students find that parking on campus is a difficult feat at best, suggesting that the administration needs to do something about this issue. Okay? But here's our basic pattern, right? Talk to me a little bit about this, like, what do you see it doing here, the participle? Why is it valuable? What do you think, Shaylee?
It's sort of acting as like a place where you can sort of analyze the statement that's being made,
okay,
and sort of say like why you're giving us this information, like what we can draw, what conclusions we can draw
okay.
from that.
Good, good, thank you. What else, Carly? Or Candy?
It's also kind of like the action statement almost. Like,
What do
here's
you
the
mean by that?
problem. It goes like, here's the problem and here's what needs to be done about it.
And could
Or
you
this
see
is
it?
what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, and could you see me then in the next few sentences talking about, well, here's what I think the administration ought to be doing,
Yeah.
right? Almost like a transition into, I've set it up, now let me explore it. Okay, good. So let's try this on our own, okay? You can write something, you can write a sentence that's related to your own op-ed, or you can just make something up. I don't really care, okay? But here's the structure. We'll keep that however, and then I want you to state an observation and set that off with commas, and then create a participial phrase drawing sort of broader conclusions or suggesting action or something like that. If you're really stuck, you're not sure, you could just fill in the blank on this sentence. This, however, the city of Provo has time and time again said that high-speed internet is important, suggesting blank. Or write something else, okay? Let's see what you can do there. All right, let's share a couple of these that you come up with. Candy, why don't you tell us read your sentence that you wrote for us.
Okay. However, if white kids tend to be a little disrespectful to the BYU students, suggesting they don't view it as a working campus during the summer.
Okay, very good, very good. All right, follows the same structure, right? Got that observation and then an inference or something. Great. Rachel, share one with us.
I wrote, however, most students of English find grammar to be dry and meaningless, suggesting that changes should be made to the way we approach teaching grammar in the classroom.
Well done.
Thank you.
Nice. Okay.
Thank
All right. Wow, I'm gonna have to buy a lot of gift cards for people in here. Okay. All right. I want to show you something else from these models that I think will be very appropriate for your op-ed. We've talked in this op-ed about how we're constructing an argument, and so we want some evidence. And sometimes that evidence will take the form of quotations from sources, or statistics from sources, maybe. And one of the sentences that I had you look at is this one, which is about the conflict in Syria, actually. I didn't give you a lot of context to it, but what I want you to notice about this example is how the author has taken a couple of different sources from whom she's directly quoting and integrated them into one sentence. Now that's good skills, right? That's good writing. But, I can't get this straight, sorry. But I want you to notice too how in the second half of the sentence, she uses, or he uses a participial phrase to do that. And again, we see this participle arguing, all right? But then we've got a quote that comes after it that helps support what's coming before. So with that in mind, I want us to imitate this structure too and play around with it a little bit. So here's my effort. Going back to the parking issue. One official doesn't see a need for more student parking spaces, comma, arguing that, quote, most student housing is within easy walking distance of campus. Okay. What am I doing here in this sentence? How am I using the participial phrase?
Well, you're introducing a quote, and it gives it a lot more like strength for your argument.
Why?
Because it's a direct quote.
Okay.
And it's also like, again, you don't have to start with the same like the official said blah blah blah. It's not as boring or redundant.
Flows better?
Yes, with the participle.
Smoother. Okay, good.
It's better.
Okay. And integrating other people's quotes or even statistical data sometimes can be challenging for us as writers. So here's one technique to make it flow more smoothly and be a little more organic in the way it comes in. So why don't you try to imitate this same structure? Here it is basically. You start by stating a fact or observation, then use a comma to set off your participial phrase that has that direct quote in it. And maybe see if you can play with maybe there's a different participle you could use besides arguing or suggesting. Try it, okay? And if you're really stuck, here's a sentence from Michael Bay doesn't think there are enough explosions in his movies, comma, arguing. And then you could quote him directly. But make sure you incorporate a direct quote in that participial phrase. Give it a stab. Okay, let's hear a couple of these. McKinley, will you share yours?
Okay. Her mother isn't a huge fan of sweatpants, arguing that a woman should never leave the house unless she looks her best.
Nice. Okay. Anybody use a different participle than arguing?
Pushing for.
Oh, will you read yours for us, Liza? It's okay if it's a little rough. It doesn't matter.
Professor Austinson thinks highly of participial phrases, pushing for, quote, a world full of competent participial lovers.
Okay. I like pushing for. That's a good one. Okay. Any others? Did you use any different ones? What else could we say besides arguing or pushing for?
You could use the word explaining.
Explaining?
Because that's what I used.
Okay, good. Yeah. Claiming.
Confirming that.
Confirming that. Yeah, I like any of those.
Stating.
Stating, denying. Denying could be a really interesting one in the way it sets up a contrast, right? The ones we've been looking at sort of follow each other. They affirm. Thank you. But you could suggest some opposites by, and that's a nice way to bring two voices into a single sentence in your writing. Make it really economical and show how they're opposed to each other. Okay, that's great, guys. Now, hold on. Okay, so now what we want to do is you're going to pull out the drafts of your op-ed piece, and I want you to look through there, and I want you to see where you could use a participial phrase. You might expand a sentence that you've already written and add some additional information to a participial through a participial phrase, or even probably more likely is you'll combine a couple of sentences together. Put one into a participial form and then combine it to the sentence before it or after it or something like that. Okay, let's go ahead and do that right now, and we'll talk about some of your results.